Welcome to the 2021 Friday Harbor Virtual Film Festival Director Series. I'm Mayor Farhad Ghatan from Friday Harbor, here to thank our viewers for their interest and participation in this discussion in a most timely and relevant film of both inspiration and hope. Katharina Stieffenhofer is a Winnipeg-based documentary filmmaker with an interest in regenerative agriculture, environmental sustainability, and social justice. Her 2010 work, And This Is My Garden, was her first documentary film and followed a school gardening project in northern Manitoba that empowered students with the skills to grow their own food sustainably. Welcome, Katharina.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. You know, a question just pops to the top of my head every time I think about the pandemic that we have been experiencing, and that is, will this empower people to get back to the earth and get back to growing things and thinking more of sustainability? What do you see in that, in the benefits coming from this terrible event?
Well, I think there are always silver linings, and I think the pandemic has started people to get more interested in gardening. Everybody had to stay home, or still has to stay home, and there for a while, going to grocery stores is still a bit iffy, and for a while it was also problems. The supply chains were problematic, so food security has become much more important, much more at the forefront of people's minds. And also with the extra time and time at home, people have become so interested and engaged in gardening that last spring, seed suppliers could not keep up. They had to close down their websites, and we're running out of seeds. And the same with, I tried to find composted manure for my own garden, and there was none to be had. And it appears that there's similar things happen again this year. Just so much interest in gardening. And of course, this is a great time for people to learn how to grow their own food, but also to save seed and to increase seed and food security.
That's wonderful. I want to invite the audience to ask questions. I will be reading those off of the restream here, so feel free to enter your question and I'll read. But I have one other question on the subject of seed saving. I see that movement has been growing, and thanks to your film and the awareness that you give for that, I see a lot of change coming about with people refusing the GMOs and even going against farmers, going against some of the legal roadblocks that Monsanto and other corporations have created for using their own seeds. What do you see in the future of that?
Well, it's very interesting. This you're speaking of farmers, and they're, for forever it has been farmers' right and responsibility to save their own seed and to replant it every year and to exchange it with neighbors and to select their own seed. And over the past few decades, that has been changing, and seed companies, which often are also chemical companies, and with the GMOs, they are taking more and more proprietorship of seed, and also lobbying governments to create policy that, for example, there is one agreement, a trade agreement, UPOF 91 or UPOF 78. And where now this right, farmers' right, has been changed into a privilege. And a privilege, of course, can be taken away. So there is constant pressure on governments to privatize seed breeding. And so it's here in Canada, the National Farmers Union has been very active for decades and pushing back against this and trying to raise awareness, because all of this is happening not sort of in the democratic realm, and most people are not aware of these pressures and how dangerous that is to all of our food security and seed security and biodiversity. So it's something that, like, I can only recommend for all eaters, because this affects all of us, to research and be aware of seed rights and the pressures on governments to privatize.
Yes. I have a question here from the audience. How did you come up with the concept for From Seed to Seed and your selection of the farmers to follow for a season?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you very much. Dr. Martin Enns, he's a plant scientist at the University of Manitoba, and I've audited classes with him. He is the foremost leader in organic research, organic agricultural research in Canada and beyond. And I've attended conferences and realized that the momentum of organic agriculture was really growing, and that more and more conventional farmers would be attending these organic conferences. And I've met all of these farmers, and one of the things that I've learned from Martin Enns is that all scales are important, small, medium, and large. It's not one is better than another. We need to have more farmers on the land. And so I wanted to demonstrate, that we can grow plenty of food and over time without using harmful chemicals. But I also wanted to show a variety of different practitioners, different farmers of different scales and different practices, as well as a conventional farmer who was interested in transitioning, and also a very young farmer who didn't, young urbanite who did not come from a farming background, but was interested in becoming a farmer. So to have this wide spectrum, and also to perhaps dispel this myth that farmers are one type of person. I just wanted to show, how much they need to learn or need to know the skills they need it takes to farm. So I wanted to inform a wide audience, and hoped to also for them to care about their farmers, because it is a two-way street. Farmers grow our food, but only 1% in Canada of the population is involved in farming, and we are getting further and further away from the source of our food and knowing how food is produced, where it comes from, and what it takes to produce it. So that was a very long answer. I don't know if I, yeah, and of course, farming is a cycle and is so dependent on the seasons and the weather. And every year, you start with a seed and you tend to the seeds, you tend to your crop, and then in the fall you harvest, and then you save your seed and you plant again. So it's always a cycle. And I wanted to also follow that cyclical cycle of farming, and which is so related and so dependent on nature.
Yes, very nice. I have another question here. Can you talk a bit about the CSA concept discussed in the film? How prevalent is this? I know we have it here on San Juan Island from a couple farms, but are you seeing this sprouting up more and more?
Yes, and there are different forms of CSAs. That CSA is community shared agriculture, and the way this works, it's at the beginning of the seasons, consumers, eaters sign up and pay ahead of the year for the farmer then to have the means to plant the seeds and have a livelihood while he is growing the food. And then once food starts growing, then weekly deliveries are made or pickups. There are different ways this works, but it is very popular, and especially, I guess, with COVID, with the pandemic, it's quite wonderful when you're a member of a CSA and your food is delivered or by the farmer, or you go to a certain spot to meet the farmer and to pick up your food. And so it's very direct. And what's also so wonderful is that you get to know your farmer. You, of course, trust the farmer. You can usually, with CSAs, you can go to the farm and you can see how the food is grown. So it's very much a trust relationship, but also it is mutually supportive. The eater, consumer, member, CSA member supports the farmer, and in return the farmer supports the consumer or the member with food. And it's supposed to be a bit of a shared risk too, but most of the time farmers will still do whatever they can, even if they have a fail, like Terry and Monique had with these horrible rains. They will still try and find ways to make up for skimpy portions and double up when there's more of something else. So it's it is a partnership, and it's actually quite wonderful, and a close relationship.
I understand that you come from a farming family, and before you emigrated to Canada, you lived on a farm. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, I had just a wonderful childhood. I grew up on a small mixed farm about the size of Terry and Monique's, about 36 acres, on a Rhine island in Germany, between Mainz and Wiesbaden. And we had dairy, and we had fruit trees, and we had wheat and potatoes and corn. And so we butchered our own pigs and chickens. So it was very much, and I think that's maybe why I responded so much and related so much to Terry and Monique, because I grew up on this farm, and I milked cows and cleaned the barns and helped harvest and make hay and all of that. So it's all so familiar to me. And I think that's where I learned to love farming, love growing my own food, but also just love of nature. And then my parents immigrated to and bought a grain farm here in Manitoba. So I also learned quite a different way of farming that is practiced here. So I have a soft spot for farming and farmers and growing food and growing food with regeneratively, ecologically.
Have you been able to get your garden going this year? Is it still early there? Or?
Well,
you have a short season.
My cheeks are probably a little bit red, And that is because today we had this amazing 15-degree weather. And so I carried all my seedlings outside and put them in the sun. And then I knew, like I don't want them to get cold. So I probably set a world record in bringing them all back in before coming on. So, and every year I start my seedlings too early and too many. And then, so I really need a greenhouse, but 2 of my bedrooms are full of plants right now. And ever since when I started from seed to seed, I have become increasingly and compulsively a seed saver. And I'm now exchanging seeds with a wonderful lady in Indianapolis. And also I found this other lady in Romania. And I guess we're not really supposed to exchange seeds so much, but we, just a little bit. And so we kind of exchanged some seeds. So that's super exciting to always try new varieties, and you never stop learning. And no, it's a real passion of mine to garden.
Nice. I have a question about these seed banks that have been formed. What do you know about the progress they're making in identifying and putting away and store? I mean, seeds can only be saved for so many years before they're not viable. So how does that work?
Well, I was actually surprised. I had some tomato seeds that were like 4 years old, and they still germinated beautifully. So it's a little different for different kinds of seeds, and some of them remain viable for quite a few years, some a little less. But to keep the seed viable, you will have to grow it out, and every so many years, and then re-save the seed, and then you can set it aside. I'm not an expert on seed banks, but before COVID, there were seedy Saturdays every spring, when people would together and exchange seeds, and seed growers, the open pollinated heritage seed growers would get together and sell seed and trade seed. And I guess the pandemic has it always was such a wonderful social event, and that's also something that the pandemic has put a monkey wrench in. But so there's still virtual events and virtual seed exchanges, and I save so much seed, and I'm happy to mail it or meet with people and pass it along. And I actually, just as you mentioned it, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but here is this little seed house. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is just something that has happened in a small village here in Manitoba that I just read about. And so this lady put this little, how sometimes there's these library boxes that people put books in on the street. So she put this little house with, and one drawer is for flower seeds and one drawer is for vegetable seeds. And she says on there, put in a package and put in what it is and a date. And, you take some and you leave some. And so there's, we are, we're creative and we have ideas, and, we can come up with ways of saving seeds. And so the thing is that there's lots of information, books and online on how to save seeds. I would encourage anyone who gardens to save seeds. And also, like, if you're out in nature and, you see some wildflowers and you see seeds, that's also something you could, save a few, always be conservative and not take everything. But, I think it's very, very important and very important skill for all of us to learn is to save and preserve seed, and whenever, however possible, to learn how to grow our own food as much as possible.
Are you working on any other films right now, or any big projects that you have going on?
No, I'm not. I come to filmmaking from the perspective of activism. I think my mom was, both of my parents were, social activists, and so that's what prompted me to make these films, because I felt that documentary would be a good tool to inform, inspire, and engage, and hopefully, inspire people to learn how to grow their food, learn how to save seeds, go to farmers markets, get to know farmers, and get their hands into the soil, because it's just so therapeutic. So what I have been doing in the last while, it's filmmaking. Documentary filmmaking takes a lot of resources, time, energy, and it usually takes approximately 4 years of your life from beginning to end. And this is still happening. I guess I'm in the year maybe 4 or 5 now, and so I'm now starting to deal with the backlog of everything that's been left behind. And so I am not in a hurry to start anything new or to look for something new. I've been active on lobbying governments on reducing the use of pesticides, and so there's always something to keep myself busy with. But I also, at this point, there are other ways for me to be an activist other than making films. So at this point, I just want to spend time in my garden and cleaning up all of my messes, and and sort of collecting myself, and then putting out my feelers and seeing, what's my next assignment. And but I'm not actively looking for anything at this point. I let whatever the assignment is come and find me.
One of our viewers asks, in the film, the protagonist farmer said that adaptability and versatility are the 2 things an organic farmer must possess to respond to climate change. Can you speak to this a bit more in regards to organic farming?
I think I think that's all farming. I think it's and even beyond farming, but especially with farming. So my parents' grain farm is now in my name. The farmland is rented out, and I was there yesterday. And the farmer who's farming the land was already seeding wheat. We are having very unusual weather patterns, very mild and early spring, but extremely dry. I have never ever seen it so dry. The rivers, the dugouts, and the soil is already blowing. That's never happened in March, April before. So this is 2 weeks earlier than farmers would start seeding, but because it is so dry, they are hoping to get wheat seed into the ground, and we are forecasting, the forecast is for 3 days of snow starting tomorrow. So it's really crazy. So the farmers have to just kind of go with the weather and go with their gut instinct and trying to estimate, what will give me the best chances. But also what we saw in the film is that the seed that has been selected and grown in a particular, on the land, and selected by the farmer for whatever does best on their soil and with their climate, that creates more resilient seed. And that is the resilience of seed that is grown under organic circumstances. It is grown to respond to the nutrients that are in the soil and not the chemical fertilizers. So it makes for, so it's really, really important for organic growers to have seed bred that is best for their region, for their area, for their soil, for their climate, but also that perform best under organic crop conditions or organic farming conditions. And yeah, so that's, I think, where we find resilience and adaptability. The farmers have to try and try to be as flexible as possible to move with the weather, with the conditions, but also make themselves more resilient with things like better, more suitable seed, breeding more suitable seed for their conditions. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, Katharina, I have a question for you on your 2010 film, and This Is My Garden. Has that project in Manitoba continued on, or did that produce more involvement, and what became of that program?
Well, the program itself it is not as active in the community anymore because the teacher retired and there was no other champion to carry on the way she had done it. And I think that is the important thing with any school gardening project. And there is a fair amount of community and school gardening happening in the north, in northern Manitoba and in Indigenous communities. And some of them looked at this project as a model. But the project itself, again, and that's, I've heard that time and time again, with any school gardening project, it's usually a teacher or two or a principal that are very engaged and active and spend a lot of volunteer time making sure that program happens. But, that's why it's also so important to tie these school gardening programs into the curriculum and fund them and have a designated teacher that carries on the program year after year after year. And then it can be tied to all kinds of different curricula that can be taught as extensions through the school gardening. And I think that really that's the best place to start for kids in, grade 4 up to, like teens. That's really when they're most open to learning. And that's where, I grew up gardening, and it's in your blood when you start young, like so many other things. And I think as a society, it would be so much healthier for all of us if we promoted and supported school gardening and community gardening.
Well, Katharina, we are so privileged to have had your film in the festival. I want to remind our viewers that it is available on demand now through April 30th at Friday at fhff.org. I want to thank you, Katharina. I want to thank our technology people for making this possible. This is the future, and we hope that you will come back to Friday Harbor and see us next time we have a film festival in live action. So,
well, I just wanted to thank you and Friday Harbor Film Festival. It is, I really have to say, it is one of my very favorite film festivals. And I felt so privileged, and I was so happy to be there for the 5 days. And I so much enjoyed meeting the organizers and the staff, and such wonderful, fantastic programming, but just everything about this festival and the setting was just so wonderful. And I already thought, well, once we can travel again, I would love to come back. I would love to come back just to be, even without a film, and just to be part of the festival and to spend time there. And I just can't thank you enough for including From Seed to Seed in your director series, and to celebrate Earth Day. And thank you very much for having me. I hope I made sense.
you did. This was very enlightening. Thank you so much.
And thank you, and all the best. Stay healthy.
Thank you. I think I'm going to go out and plant some tomato seeds.
Well, you can email me your address, and I'll send you a couple of seeds. Some pepper seeds too.
Lovely. Yeah. Last year I planted too early like you and ended up with hundreds of leggy tomatoes. This year I'm waiting and making sure I don't make that same mistake.
Yeah. Well, that's why I carry them inside and out, so that they don't get leggy.
Yeah, that hardens them off too. Very nice. Well, thanks again. All the best.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.